This is how to make a video game. Alright, so first we need to get like the definition out of the way, like what even is a game. First off, you have to be able to do things, like the player has to have choice or agency. So if it's just like sitting there watching something, that's called a movie. They have those aren't games. Second thing is a failure state. If the game has no failure state, it's more so a simulation. Like this is an iPhone game called Mountain. You literally just watch a mountain, you can tap and it drops objects onto the mountain. You don't lose ever. And this is Goat Simulator, you can never die, you just like run around and like run into things. But like games like Candy Crush, Oregon Trail and other sorts of games, or like Call of Duty, if there's ever a time when the player goes into a failure state and they think to themselves, oh, if I did it better next time, like that's considered like, the ability to choose, like affect the outcome and then have that outcome either be positive or negative. That's what we're going with our definition as a game. This being specifically video games, we'll go over the overview. So this can kind of be applied to like board games as well, but this is more so like digital stuff. So the overview of the 10 steps to go into making a game. You need to come up with your idea, create a theme around that idea, have some basic mechanics that are built into like a sandbox, making sure those are all working right. Then create the environment, maybe some character models, code in the complex mechanics, get some sound effects going, finalize the UI, and then actually release it, and then make updates. Note that numbers 4 through 8 can actually happen in any order, or maybe they can happen at the same time if you have like a large development team. But in theory, like you can't get to number 2 unless you have an idea, and like you can't really make the complex things without understanding the core of the game. Quick side note. The idea of you doing testing early and often, like getting feedback constantly, like, hey, I got this idea. Like after step 1, you ask all of your friends, hey, what do you guys think about this? Would you play this? And then after you design like the theme and the basic mechanics, say, hey guys, what do you think about this? Does this feel right? And then eventually maybe you have just like a very simple things, just getting constant feedback and constantly improving. And then start marketing early, so like posting on forums, getting screenshots, videos, maybe even a playable demo if possible. Yeah, I'll get to the downsides associated with marketing early later on. So first one, the idea. Create something that you would want to play. Like don't make something like if you were gonna create a project, you're either the head of a company or you're an indie developer. Create something that you yourself would want to play. Don't create something that you think would be kind of silly and like just trying for the sake of making money. Because if you create a great game that resonates with you, it probably resonates with other people, and you could probably make money off that. So it has to be like simple, probably a little bit emotional, explainable in a few sentences, like an elevator pitch. And then any updates or, oh, it does all these things. Like, no, that can come later. Just get a simple idea. And then create the theme around that. So like what exactly is the user experience like? Like what is the environment like, the UI like? What is the overall theme? Is it a Western? So if you say, oh, I'd like the idea for a shooter where it's a multiplayer game, well, is it a Western shooter? Is it a futuristic shooter? Like what is this all about? So if it's a fantasy kind of game or a sci-fi, you have to draw the player into it, not push them out of it. So all these pieces have to be aligned. And so you have to know from the start what your theme is, or else you will just push the player out of it and they'll immediately lose interest. Step 3, you want to create the basic mechanics of the game. So now that you have the idea, and now that you have the theme design, now you need to start creating the core of it. Like, what is it that makes your game a game? Start simple, like movement controls or like repetitive actions. So for example, like Candy Crush, you might have like a simple square thing, just like swiping up and down or left and right. Like, does that feel fun? It needs to feel fun without any superfluous content. It needs to be fun in and of itself, or else, because that's the thing they're doing all the time, they're not going to want to play the game. So I actually made a quick thing in Unity, which is a 3D game engine, to show like what a basic mechanics thing might look like. This only took about like an hour to make, just to put some perspective on time. But in theory, so you have this character, you can like run around, and like it chases the camera, you can like jump and stuff like that. Like, and if turning feels too slow, then maybe you make it go faster, or maybe you say, hey, I need to be able to run into boxes and knock them over because they're really light boxes, or maybe I need to be able to hit the G key and like shoot balls out or something and have them slam into things. And so the idea is like, if this feels fun, just running around in this sandbox environment, cool, now we can add stuff to it. But without this, if this is boring, why even waste your time making the rest of it? So Once the basic mechanics are done, now you need to build the world, build the environment. So maybe there's buildings or trees or ledges, some sort of like static props, and then create a bounded space to the player to work within. So think Super Mario Brothers. You have the actual aesthetic of the ground, the static blocks, the pipes, and then the actual bounds is the start and end of the level. You can make a boundless game like No Man's Sky or Minecraft, but it gets kind of risky because the player might venture into areas that are either not playable or not fun and not really ideal, which will potentially tarnish the user experience. Then creating the characters and other assets. Now remember, numbers 4 through 8 can happen in any order. But in theory, if you have like the world generated or like the started of it, you can get character models. It could be people's, monsters, vehicles, any sort of like character that'll be in the game. The actual art files, or what are called textures or texture mappings, as well as like particles. So for example, it's like snow or explosions or any sort of like sparks. Anything that looks very like repetitive, that's just one little file that has been repeated a ton of times through what's called a particle generator, which is actually really cool. It's an efficiency thing. So instead of creating a giant like GIF or something, they just create like one little dot that they just programmatically create a bunch. So I'll go through a couple examples of like characters and mapping. So this is like a 3D character rendering program called Maya. And an artist might go through and generate these 3D models and say, here's all the polygons of what the character might look like. And then they'll have an artist that goes through, creates this texture mapping, and then the 3D artist takes that texture mapping and applies it to the model. And it just kind of like wraps around it and applies to all the polygons. And it's actually pretty cool. That's a 3D example. A 2D example might have something called a sprite sheet. So this is like Sonic the Hedgehog. So every single frame that he runs, they have to have that 2D frame. And like these are some examples of sprite sheets of games that I've created where every single button and every like color option has to have its own thing so it can be swapped in and out whenever I need it. In terms of complex mechanics, if you wanted to have like quests, dungeons, or maybe you have a bunch of different characters that have unique abilities, if there's like matchmaking involved, this is the place to do it. This is the fluff of the game, the part that people usually remember when they think about your game. Like, oh man, Overwatch was so cool when I did this and this and this. It's like, well, the basic mechanics is like run, shoot, and like crouch or something. But like the fluff of the game is all those explosions and special abilities that have to be coded in. This is all the main bulk of like the programming of the game. And assuming you have a game that needs sound and music, because some don't, you can add background music. So this would be the stuff that plays like in the menus, stuff that happens like during the gameplay, like subtle, like peaceful music, or maybe it's intense or whatever, or maybe music during the cinematics. And then there's two types of sound effects. So there's obvious sound effects and non-obvious sound effects. Obvious ones are like, I'm running through snow and I hear like snow sounds when I'm moving, or my character's breathing, like player does something, they hear a sound. Non-obvious ones are like when you scroll over an item in the menu, or when you like select something, you click on a button, all those little clicks and buzzes, or the trees rustling, just like background sound effects that the player doesn't notice, but as a collective it adds to the theme, it adds to the environment. So think like tumbleweeds rustling in like a Western game or something like that. Then once you have the game like coded and the environment's there and you got sound effects, maybe you've already done some of the basic UI stuff. So now it's time to make those final UI changes, make the UI really fit to that theme. So you want to create the heads-up displays, so showing all the statistics that you want the player to be aware of. Maybe have a menu system that they can navigate, or maybe there's like a pause screen that they can navigate out of the game. Just any sort of menu that you might have. There are some games that don't have a menu, but those are generally like minimalist games and don't even have UI to begin with. And finally, well, second to last, you actually want to release the game. And now here's a quick note that you want to release it no matter what. It could be your own personal project. Just put it on your own website. Maybe you just have it as a download link, or maybe it's a game you intend to make with 30 other people. Maybe you release it in like an alpha stage or an early release game and have people buy it for a cheaper price and get feedback on it. And then over time, you continue to push updates. There's different app stores for all the platforms. So like there's Steam for PC. There's also like Indiegogo and other places. The iOS and Android App Store and Marketplace. There's like PlayStation, Xbox. So every platform has their store, so you got to find your right place. You could also do it on your own website, but it's a little riskier because then you have to do a lot more marketing, because with the stores you have the added benefit of people already going there, so you're just listed, versus on your own website you have to do a lot more marketing to get people to your website. And finally, you want to do patches and updates, because there is There's nothing sadder than a really cool game dying because the developers thought nobody played it or because they didn't make enough money. There was actually this 2 games that I've played on iPhone. Honestly, like one of the best games I've ever played, and I emailed the developers. I was like, hey, you guys are ever going to push updates? They're like, no, we didn't make enough money off it. I was like, so? I thought you were making this game because whatever. And so this would be the time to like implement any feedback. So hey, I found this bug, or hey, I think it'd be really cool if we had this feature. Or maybe there's something that you wanted to do months ago that just now you have the time because now the game's out there. So now push it out there. And maybe it's a storyline game that you've created. Maybe there's time for a sequel. So this would be a time to maybe add in a patch that leads into a sequel or do something to that version and just kind of consider it. If you're really interested in learning like about game development, how to get into it, or any other resources, Extra Credits is a great YouTube channel. They go over a lot of stuff. They have like 10 to 15 minute long videos on a ton of different topics for the last like 5 or 6 years. Pixel Prospector has this indie guide, like a massive checklist of things to go through in making a game. They call it an indie guide because they're targeting towards like small development teams, but it honestly still applies to large development teams. If you want to look for cross-platform development, there's an engine called Unity, which I demonstrated a little bit, and then another one called Unreal, which has like super high fidelity graphics. It's a little more complex. And then last year, I also had a book written that covers how to make games for iPhone. So if you're interested in that, you can search Mastering Cocos 2D, and it should show up as the top result in Google. If you want to check out my games, go to kitegames.com, K-E-I-T games.com. And then this is last example of a game that I made. I was playing this at one point in time. It was called Math Effect. It was just this grid thing where you clicked an arrow on one of these and like the thing moved, and then like these guys on the end came in and you have to like protect the center. And I was like, oh, this would be sweet if this was an iPad game. So I created a quick mock-up in Photoshop, and I was like, all right, this is probably what it's going to look like with just some simple menu. Who cares about the font? Who cares about the color? This is generally what it's going to look like. I created it and eventually pushed it out to the App Store for iPad and iPhone. And then I got some feedback, and one of the ladies that I got feedback from said, this is stupid. Why do I have to play this game with two hands? Can it be portrait mode? And I was like, that's a great idea. So I made it portrait mode. I was like, why didn't I think of that in the first place? And so that was just a quick example of like the idea I had, quick and dirty mock-ups to get the basic mechanics underway, actually releasing it, and then updating later on. If you guys want to look at this game, it's called Cubic. It is on the App Store. It's also like on my website and stuff like that, but that's for another day. So thank you very much. Hope you appreciate it. Do you guys have any questions or anything? Yeah.
You mentioned you're going to get into some of the problems with marketing earlier.
Oh, yeah. So if, where was it? Yeah, whatever. So yeah, if you actually decide to do early marketing, don't fall into the trap of No Man's Sky, where you tell a ton of people about the features and you show off all these great things and then you just don't release it, or it's not up to the hype. Obviously, marketing and hype are balancing things, but if you're showing off things, it's almost like expected that those things are already done, which is why you're showing them off. So that's just an early marketing beware, that's all. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I think as like a developer, usually the part that I can't do when it comes to a game would be like art design and things like that. Have you ever, you do all of your own artwork, or do you like find people to collaborate with that can usually do some of the more artistic side of things? And, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, so the question was that if I'm a programmer and I don't know how to art, how do I do that? Basically, you could try to do it on your own, which is what I've done, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've just had a lot of years of Photoshop experience that I'm able to do a decent amount of stuff. But I know people who have outsourced work through like Elance or Upwork or other sorts of websites where there's freelance artists. If you are obviously like a company, you'd probably just hire an artist. If you're doing it on your own, on the cheap end, try to find a friend who's really good at art and say, hey, can you do some mock-ups for me? Or hey, do you know Photoshop or Illustrator? And can you create some stuff for me?
So for Unity, you have the asset store?
Oh, yes.
Find something that's very close to what your game is, enough that you can do a mock-up, as Alex says, and you can release maybe as a closed beta not charging for it, and then that'll actually bring those teams. It's surprising to release a game come out of the woodwork. You put out a request for like, I need an artist. They're not there. You release the game, they're like, dude, I could have drawn it better. You're like, yes.
Yeah. And so this is an example. So this is the Unity store that he was talking about. So like on a platform like Unity, if you need 3D models, which is more than just Photoshop, and you're like, I don't know how to model, I don't know how to make texture mapping, I don't want to pay someone to do that, you can go to the asset store and let's say, oh, you need dinosaurs or something. You could just search and like $15 you can get a pack of dinosaurs. Or
this is like user created.
yeah, this is all user generated. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's really cheap, like $2. Sometimes there's a lot of them for $75.
Rights to like sell.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're licensed under different models. Usually it's when you buy it, you're licensed. They do have a couple that are attributed, but
yeah.
You can't put something out here that is a per like sale. It has to be an all in.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of the difference between like 2D and 3D, and then like, yeah. Yeah.
Are you available to help with problems for Unity? Because I was working on something a while back and had some trouble.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I can help you out with that. Anyone have any other questions? Yeah.
Would you say No Man's Sky is a great game or the greatest game ever released?
A great game or the greatest game?
Right.
Those are my options.
Yeah.
Between those two options, great game. Appending my own option, great if they actually add more to do. It has a great foundation, but not. Is it a game? You can die. Yeah, it's hard to do though. There's no difficulty. You just go into it.
Stare at the sky.
You could be like, there's no men up there. I know.
I know how to die.
Oh.
That is, while you're playing after work, if you fall asleep with the controls in your hands, you'll wake up 5 minutes later with a death marker.
That's good. That's basically what it is, which is what, like, it has a great foundation, but there's no content to go to.
Right.
So it's, by definition of a game, yes, it is, and it does look beautiful with like high resolution graphics, but there's nothing to do. It's literally just an exploration game. Yeah.
With as much effort as you obviously put into this creating games, does it bother you that an ultra simplistic game like Five Nights at Freddy's has garnered all this publicity and all this popularity?
I would argue that an ultra simplistic game would be like Flappy Bird. Five Nights at Freddy's is probably still took them a couple months to make, or up to a year. One guy? Yeah.
Like a day.
No, it took him about 3 months, and he used a lot
it
of
was like it was months.
from his other weird games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy Birds. Let's talk about No Man's Sky. You literally
But
play a game and do what you can just go outside and do.
so to that point, that is more so a question about virality in social media, as well as like marketing efforts and stuff like that. Because I heard that the Flappy Bird guy, for example, was making $50,000 a day from advertising, and because it was such an annoying game, people talked about it, which made it go like this in terms of virality. So it's just yeah. One of my games, the one I showed at the very end, that actually, I initially had it for $1, had about like 200 something downloads, and I was like, that's not bad. That's better than my other games I've released for $1. Because people on the App Store are like, $1 is insane. It's the cheapest you can go without being free, whatever. And so I eventually made it free as I pushed out the portrait mode, and then I like emailed a ton of different like blogging websites, like even ones in other countries and other languages. I went to Google Translate. I was like, oh, German, yeah, sure. And some guy in, I think, China and somewhere in Germany actually posted the article and featured it, and I ended up getting like 35,000 downloads within like 2 days. So that was pretty cool. All free downloads, but still. Well, thank you very much.